আজকের লেকচারে দিচ্ছেন আমাদের ফার্স্ট নাসের চেয়ার হোল্ডার ডক্টর স্যাম মান্নান। তিনি ডিরেক্টর মেডিকেল ও কমন প্রসেস সেফটি সেন্টার টেক্সাস A&M ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং এক্সপেরিমেন্ট স্টেশন, বেসিক্যালি টেক্সাস A&M ইউনিভার্সিটির অংশ এটা। আজকে আমাদের মাঝে উপস্থিত আছেন আমাদের শ্রদ্ধেয় ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর প্রফেসর খালেদা ইকরাম। আর আপনারা যারা আছেন, এই লেকচারটা বেসিক্যালি আমাদের ফ্যাকাল্টি মেম্বারদের জন্য, তো আমি ধন্যবাদ জানাই যারা কষ্ট করে বিকালে ঘুম ত্যাগ করে চলে এসেছেন। থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। প্লাস যাদের ক্লাস আছে তারা নিশ্চয়ই অ্যাডজাস্ট করে এসেছেন, থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ। তো আমি শুরুতে যেটা করবো, আমাদের মাঝে আছেন ডক্টর জসিমুজ্জামান, যিনি আমাদের স্যার এবং এই নাসার চেয়ারের কাজ এগিয়ে নেওয়ার ব্যাপারে এবং বিশেষ করে ডক্টর স্যাম মান্নানের সিলেকশন প্রসেসের ব্যাপারে তার ভূমিকা ছিল। আমি তাকে একটু আহ্বান করবো স্টেজে কিছু বলার জন্য, শুভেচ্ছা বক্তব্য দেওয়ার জন্য। স্যার।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম, সবাইকে স্বাগত। এটা অত্যন্ত আনন্দের বিষয় যে আমরা আজকে প্রফেসর স্যাম মান্নানের কাছ থেকে কারিকুলাম ডেভেলপমেন্ট সম্বন্ধে ফিউচার অফ কেমিক্যাল ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং অ্যান্ড ইঞ্জিনিয়ারিং এডুকেশন জেনারেল এই বিষয়ে বক্তব্য শুনব। আমি আজকে জাস্ট সবার জন্য বলতে চাই প্রফেসর নাসির সম্বন্ধে দুটি কথা এবং এই চেয়ার সম্বন্ধে দুটো কথা। Professor Naser was the pioneer in the development of chemical engineering education in this institution in the country. He was a dedicated teacher and he always wanted to build relationship with the industry. I'm quoting from the document that we have for the Professor Naser chair. It says, I'm quoting it because we all have to, we all can learn something from it. It says, above all, Professor Naser was a dedicated teacher. He always came to the class well prepared. His step-by-step presentation of lecture material, never skipping the simplest of calculations, passion for neatness and clarity, and his beautiful handwriting, his grace and personality left a lasting legacy in the minds of his students. Professor Naser treated everyone with respect. He endeared himself with students by virtue of his great qualities as a teacher and as a very decent human being. In recognition of the contribution made by Professor Naser, pioneer in chemical engineering education in Bangladesh, the Chemical Engineering Alumni Association of BUET decided to establish Naser chair in the chemical engineering department. We remember him on this day and every day in our life for his contribution to the department and to the chemical engineering education. Now I just read one line or two lines from the purpose of the chair. The appointees to the chair will take effective steps to enhance relationships between the university and the industry. The chair will bring in expertise from industry and academia in new areas of chemical engineering and enrich the current curricula, develop new contents, and lead initiatives in expanding research activities. I am very pleased that in our search for Naser chair, we came up with the selection and agreement of Professor Sam Mannan to hold the chair. We are very thankful to him for his acceptance and for his work as the chair, as the holder of the first holder of the chair. And I wish to acknowledge to him and to all of you that the purpose of the chair to bring in industrial contact, to bring in new experience, new ideas, new initiatives, and to build relationship with industry, everything has been attempted and we are looking forward to a fruitful output in all these activities. And this is the great accomplishment that was possible because of his direct contribution and direct interest in what the department is trying to achieve and what, as a whole, as alumni, we want to achieve in engineering practice as well. So I wish to thank you for coming and listening to Professor Mannan today, and my special thanks to Professor Mannan for giving this lecture, which we will hear very soon. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Professor Mannan.
Thank you, Professor Jasim Zaman, for that nice introduction. Thank you, Professor Razia Sultana, for all the arrangements and organization. Thank you, all the professors that have taught me when I was here, and thank you all for attending. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. In fact, these last few months, the year that I've held the Naser chair, it has been a journey of pleasure. I have enjoyed working with many of you, and particularly the young professors of the Chemical Engineering Department. I also want to thank Vice Chancellor Professor Brown for the support and nice conversations we have had at the time that I visited her. So all in all, I received a lot of support and help in accomplishing some of the things that we've done in the past. But I wanted to assure you that as far as I'm concerned, this is not the end. I think I have made that clear to the faculty members, the department head, and others that I have talked to, that I want to keep on contributing, and I want to keep on coming back here if you can tolerate my presence, hopefully. So today I want to address the issue of curriculum development to address the changing nature of the engineering profession. I will start by giving you a glimpse into my personal experience in terms of what I faced as a young engineer in the United States when I went to work. As you may know, I started my academic career after my PhD in 1986 from the University of Oklahoma. And then 3 years or 3.5 years into that first faculty job, I left to work in the industry. And as a result, I have a long number of years of experience working in the US industry, but then ultimately I returned to my first love, which is teaching in academia. But also I'll tell you that because of that dual experience, we call it 50-50 experience both in industry and academia, it gave me probably a unique insight into how we should be educating our engineers and what they may be required to do when they hit the workforce. So the personal story, that experience that I wanted to tell you, occurred when I left University of Oklahoma to start my industry job. And when I started work there, one of the first projects that I worked on involved compliance with risk management program requirements of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. Now, you know, in the undergraduate chemical engineering program or the PhD program, I worked on solving a lot of problems. You know, I sometimes wondered if shortage had a cat and if the cat was still alive, dealt with vessels functions and things like that. So those kinds of things were not a problem for me to deal with. But this first project that I was involved with really gave me some interesting insight into what skills engineers required to survive in this day, even at that time, and that's been already 20, 25 years earlier, or more than that actually. But in any case, what the project was that in compliance with the risk management requirements, the facility had to conduct worst case scenario analysis. And worst case scenario analysis involved looking at the worst accident that could happen and then determine how far the population would be impacted. But that was not the end of it, or that was the easier part of it, because chemical engineers, we can do transport modeling, dispersion analysis and things like that. So we did that calculation pretty easily. But then the second part of the requirement of the regulation was that you had to take these results from the worst case scenario analysis and then call a public meeting, like in a room like this, or usually a much larger auditorium, where a few hundred of the community were present. And your job as the engineer would be to explain to them what you were doing in that facility, and if that worst case scenario happened, that it would kill them all. Now, regardless of what kind of education you've had, how do you explain that as a young engineer? And that's what we were faced with, is how to explain the risk that you're, when the worst case happens, you are going to kill people. But how do you explain to people that this worst case is not going to happen because we're doing this, this, this? And how best to do it? Is it that you explain the prevention program first, and then, by the way, if the prevention program doesn't work, then we have this worst case scenario? Or do you talk about the worst case first, and then talk about the prevention program? And when do you run away from that crowd? So it was an interesting experience, least to say, but that opened my eyes as to one thing that I even today require my students to do. And that is that regardless of the technical nature of your work, you have to be able to explain what your science is or what you have accomplished in layman's terms, in such simple terms that someone without a high school education or someone with an 8th grade education can understand. You can't say that, how can you ask me to explain my PhD work to an 8th grade person? It doesn't work that way, because if you're required to go and explain risk or worst case scenario to the public, then you should be required to explain your PhD on cell tissue technology to the layman, or your PhD on Schrödinger's equation to the layman. And not only that, you should be able to explain what is the impact to the society. So for every PhD and master's student that finishes the program in our program, they're required to, and they will not pass if they don't finish this requirement. When they submit their dissertation or thesis, they're required to submit a one-page, no more than one-page summary of their dissertation, which can be understood by laymen, by people who have no more than an 8th degree education. Okay, and believe me, some of you might think that's probably an easy requirement. That is the hardest thing for them to do. They spend 4 or 5 years doing their PhD, and then they wrestle over how to explain that in one page that people like that can understand. So, if in terms of change, you are thinking about why things have changed or what drives those changes, this current slide kind of outlines that. Engineering has grown dramatically, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment. There are challenges that engineering faces from different areas. Years ago, even 10, 15 years ago, if I told you that engineers are working on drug delivery? You'd probably be saying, you're crazy, how can that be? But today, engineers are in the forefront of research on drug delivery, particularly related to major diseases that can be cured by proper drug delivery to the human body and human system. Engineers are working in solving problems in outer space. Engineers are working in solving problems in the area of neural networks, application neural networks in different areas, and so forth. Engineers are also involved in the crossroads of business and other disciplines, financial engineering, and so forth. Of course, engineers are involved in a major way in the cyber world, which dominates our lives these days. So, if we are to keep in pace, not just the fact that our work has to relate with the common man and be able to be explained to common laymen, and we have to deal with all these new areas, then it stands to reason that we have to stay many steps ahead of these changing needs. And then finally, you have the issue of sustainable development, where, as you know, these changes, they're also bringing with them the issue of safety problems, the issue of environmental problems, and other impacts which impact the ecological makeup of our universe. So today I'm going to talk about the powerful array of technological challenges that are currently driving changes in the role of engineering in society. For example, when I went to school here at BUET, the foundational sciences for chemical engineering, they were considered to be three: mathematics, physics, and chemistry. Okay, but right now that's not true anymore. It has changed to where biology is also included as a foundation science. In fact, we can learn so much from biological systems to be able to implement that on behalf of society, for mankind to have a better living and better conditions. There is this new area of biomimetics where useful advances can be made. So this change currently requires far more broader skills than the mastery of scientific principles of traditional planning. In the past, what we had is engineering divided into four major branches: mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, civil, and electrical, with sub-branches of each discipline. In fact, during my study in BUET here, there were only 5 major branches of engineering, and that is only as far back as early 1980s. Late 1970s and early 1980s. In those times, we had, in addition to the Faculty of Architecture, we had 5 branches of engineering: civil, electrical, mechanical, chemical, and metallurgical. But today, if you look at those 5 branches of engineering, they have blossomed into 16 different departments under 5 of the original faculties it started with. So this gives rise to the question of what fuels this growth. But not only do we have these new areas of engineering, or new disciplines of engineering, but what has really mushroomed is these intersections, or what we have started calling as the interdisciplinary branches of engineering, which are really driving the growth and driving the solutions to human problems today. In fact, there is the National Science Foundation study, U.S. National Science Foundation study, in which it was felt that 90% of the problems society faces today are solved by interdisciplinary approaches. That single discipline approaches are no longer possible to solve the problem. And that's why you see NSF funding more and more projects which are interdisciplinary in nature. So one major suggestion or advice I give you here is that as much as you can do as an institution, as a university, to break down barriers between these different departments, the better off you are in the money game and in solving ultimately the problems of the society. It is true that the needs of society have required us to grow more departments, but now we have to go the other way. We have to look at the objectives of the problems that we are solving and say, which disciplines do we have to bring together? You don't necessarily have to coalesce departments together, but you have to keep in mind which disciplines you have to bring together to solve those interdisciplinary problems. For example, a lot of problems that we see today in the chemical engineering arena require a major intersection with biological engineering. A lot of problems we see in the cyberspace research requires, again, cross-disciplinary work. So whatever you can do to break the barriers, break the silos in between different majors in engineering, the better off you are. And as I said, the better off you are from the point of view of funding, as well as from the point of view of solving problems. So why is change required? There are various reasons that drive changes in engineering. One of the major reasons is the transformation of knowledge. In simple terms, updating the progress in the field. And the progress in the field is so rapid and so voluminous that it requires the change in the field. Second, you hear of globalization all the time. In countries like Bangladesh, transformation of knowledge into products and processes is critical to competitiveness and long-term productivity growth that requires leaderships in all aspects of engineering research to build scientific discovery and practical applications. It is also important to improve engineering in order to compete with other growing nations. So, to compete with talented engineers in other nations, far greater numbers and with far lower wage structures, our engineers must be able to add significantly more value to their capacity to innovate. Now, in this respect, demographics is important. Okay? But if you are going to produce far greater numbers, then you need to make sure that the demographic balance in that respect is there. And I think in that respect, Bangladesh is playing its role. It is similarly important to improve the role of engineering, what your discipline is, or what you do to solve a problem. All they care about is whether or not you're solving the problem that you're facing. So the fact that it requires the marriage of medical science, chemical engineering transfer phenomenon, heat and fluid transfer, to solve the issue of drug delivery, they don't care. If you can solve it that way, all society wants is the solution. So one of the key ways to address these changes is to improve research and development in universities. One might argue that the role of universities is only teaching and mentoring. Okay? In fact, sometimes politicians, even in the United States, they argue as to why should university professors do research. In fact, at one time, even at Texas A&M, our Board of Regents started requiring us to justify our time. So if we were not able to show time in classroom activities, they're starting to call that in question. And there was a time that for a time we were butting heads or at loggerheads with the Board of Regents as the legislature. So at one time, I had an opportunity to serve on a committee where I met with one of the Board of Regents for some activity as well as developing a small report for something that the Board of Regents was working on. So since I had that opportunity, I asked him that what views he had on this topic. And clearly enough, he felt that research was way too overvalued and that we professors should be spending more time in the classroom. So I asked him to define classroom to me. And he said, well, when you go in and lecture and you teach them about some subject and so forth. So I asked him about our football coach. And I said that the football coach usually coaches about only 16 games a year in the US football system. And 16 games, the games usually last about 3 hours each game. But if you look at the real active time that the game is on, it's about maybe 20 or 25 minutes in totality, time of action. But even if you take 3 hours, then I said, well, would you then think that the football coach was working with his team only 3 hours? He says, no. When he is doing the practices and all that, I said, okay, let's add on the practice time. What about the rest of the time? He says, well, no, he's giving them life lessons and so on and so forth. So then I tried to explain to him what a university professor does and what role the research plays into it. And I said to him that, look, yes, there is classroom teaching, but there are other kinds of teaching. For example, when I sit down with my student and write a proposal, and even if it's an unsuccessful proposal, am I not teaching him or her how to express their ideas in a meaningful way where somebody is willing to put their own money into it, somebody is willing to fund it. So I think, I don't know if I was able to convince him of anything, but at least I gave him something to think about. And fortunately, I don't think it was only because of my efforts, but fortunately, I think because of many things, ultimately the Board of Regents shelved the idea of trying to characterize the teaching effectiveness of professors by their time in the classroom. And so you need to be able to assess how you build world-class engineers. And as I said, it's not just in the classroom, and it's not just the book information. It's the ability to write proposals. It's the ability to communicate ideas. It's the ability also to sometimes deal with failures and learn from failures and move forward. Who are the stakeholders in building these activities and so forth? So research is beyond academics, as I said. It's a tool for building knowledge. It's a means to understand various issues and then being able to use those understanding in transforming beyond academics. So when you conduct research and you're an active researcher, then you bring into the classroom all the things that are new and all the things that are going to impact the world. Because the engineer that you are training or educating will go on to interact with this world. So all the frontier issues that you are teaching them from research is helpful in developing that world-class engineer. So, as I said, who are the stakeholders for implementing research? Naturally, we want global transnational companies for funding these kinds of research. It is integral to teaching, and universities have an important role in this, as I said. But the question is, how do you fund it? And clearly, from ancient times and countries and societies, where research has been funded has prospered. You just have to look up history and look at how, different countries' trajectories for research. And I give a list of potential stakeholders there here which can be investing in the research, and there can be major players for funding. In an example which is relevant here in the case of Bangladesh, for example, Chevron operates large gas fields in Bangladesh. Collaboration can be brought about to improve the chemical engineering department or seek industry-based projects and proposals from Chevron and other companies to help not only the education and teaching process, but help solve their problems. As I've always said, the university is a place where solutions are looking for problems, whereas the industry is a place where the problems looking for solutions. You bring those two together, then you have a very fruitful marriage. Large international organizations such as UNESCO, United Nations, World Bank, IFC, and others can fund, and naturally other professional organizations, particularly government funding agencies like National Science Foundation in the US and others here in Bangladesh can be funding these research. And then individual companies or individual members. Why do these companies need to fund this research, and what's in it for them? What's in it for them is the sustainable development. Our engineering education, and when I say our engineering education, I just don't necessarily only mean engineering education in Bangladesh, but engineering education worldwide today lacks integration of knowledge needed for modern industry practice. And by integration of knowledge, I mean the cross-section of not just the technical knowledge like transport, and fluids, and thermodynamics, but how does it intersect with the social community, the economy, and environment. So that kind of integration is lacking and is inadequate in providing students with an understanding of societal impact and global role of engineering. One of the questions I try to ask my students, anytime they present something, the question that I will ask is, so what? So what you've come up with is, what does it mean in terms of this diagram where it intersects, your work intersects with the community, the economy, and the environment. So my vision for engineering education brings together elements of manufacturing, design, and sustainable engineering in an integrated manner. And interwoven through this new paradigm is the consideration of risk in every aspect. An engineer must function as a member of the global community and a person who shares global responsibilities. These responsibilities entail proper account of the finite world resources, sensitivity to the impact on the environment, ethical conduct, process safety, risk consideration, and much more. Today's engineering extra but much needed aspect could be called a sustainable dimension to engineering education, the intersection of these three circles that I've shown here. So it can be summarized as the design of materials, processes, products, and systems to sustain good and safe conditions for human health and environment. And sustainable development, as you know, can be defined as the development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's a tall order. Just meeting the needs of the nation with 150 million plus people, I think that itself has its challenges. But doing that in such a way that future generations you don't take away from them is particularly much more challenging. So sustainable engineering, what are the steps for that? Identification of focus areas and stakeholders. So what you have to do to address the changes in the engineering profession, you should start with a sustainable approach where the current generation of engineers and the future generation of engineers are benefited equally. Okay. And here I put forward these 5 steps which I think are crucial in attaining that. And the 5 steps include identification of focus areas and stakeholders, build, as I said, breaking down the barriers between departments and things like that, and addressing issues of importance to the society and making sure that the learnings are transferred from generation to generation. First of all, on the identification of focus areas, some of those are what? For example, environmental problems, restoring and improving urban urban infrastructure, engineering better medicines, for example, this bioinfo nano revolution or technologies that are coming about, engineering the tools of scientific global discovery. And again, the stakeholders who are useful in this process are the 4 that I've shown you earlier too. Now, in this slide, what I've tried to do is compare between what I call the emerging fields of engineering disciplines and the enduring fields. So, you know, for example, enhanced oil recovery is an emerging field at a certain point in time when enhanced oil recovery plays a role. Okay. But after enhanced oil recovery procedures are put into place, that field kind of dies away after a while. But on the other hand, if you compare the fields that are on the right, under enduring, these are fields that endure the test of time, regardless of whether you need enhanced oil recovery or you don't need it. Safety engineering is always going to be there. Now, in the past, we haven't had much focus on safety engineering because the industry hadn't grown to that point where population was not threatened to that point where it was required. Similarly, nanomedicine is an emerging field, or what you would call is a need of the time. Whereas on the right-hand side, offshore technology, robotics, powder metallurgy, these are enduring fields. You will need them all the time. And what we have to do is, given the time and the needs era we live in, we have to figure out which ones are the emerging field and which ones are the enduring fields. Naturally, enduring fields, you need a continuous effort, a system, an effort that is embedded into the engineering program. Whereas emerging fields, you can meet those needs through interdisciplinary efforts and through programmatic efforts. So engineering for tomorrow, first of all, you have to meet the changes in engineering, and it often is accompanied by changes in tools and expertise that is required to address the changes. This is accompanied by cutting-edge tools and techniques which aid in growth. And while addressing these changes, it is also important to understand the gaps and focus the areas that require improvement. Areas such as nanotechnology and renewable energy require enhancement of knowledge. So these 4 quadrangles, as you can see, encompass both emerging and enduring fields. And depending on where they belong, for example, you have on the upper left-hand side cutting-edge fields in engineering, whereas on the right-hand side you have the cutting-edge tools and techniques. I mean, a few years ago, you would be surprised as to what 3D modeling or 3D printing could do. Similarly, on the left-hand side, on the bottom, you have areas identified as for knowledge enhancement, and then you have areas where you need greater desirable skills. So building good engineering skills, you'd be amazed what companies that we talk to say these days in terms of what they want. If you look at it, if you're trying to graduate, let's say a chemical engineer or a mechanical engineer or what have you, you would think that you would probably want the requirements that are listed only under strong analytical skills or these foundation sciences and things like that. But look at what the employers are wanting out there. They're wanting not only analytical skills and practical ingenuity, they want creativity, communication, business and management, professionalism, ethics, and above all, leadership. And so, at its core, engineers will still need to excel in the application of science and engineering, but more and more, they will also need these softer skills for which the curriculum changes will have to make that jump. So above all, I stress the importance of leadership as it is critical to education and training of a professional engineer. Leadership skills are required to train engineers who will eventually lead companies and agencies. It is important to note that engineering leadership skills are critical at all levels of engineering. And they should be able to take leadership in assessing risks and taking initiative, the willingness to make decisions in the face of uncertainty. Not all the time do you have complete knowledge of everything that you do, but you can't sit there and not make decisions. So what I'm talking about is you have to make decisions in uncertainty. And so how do we teach that to our engineers? Okay. One of the first things to teach them is that to let them know that we don't live in a deterministic world. We live in a probabilistic world. Okay. Second thing is that when they present to you numbers or calculation results for a problem where the answer is given in terms of 8 digits after the decimal. I mean, I'm sure you have all seen that, but my response is to immediately cross that whole paper out and say, we've got to see them. Because how can you get an answer where your answer is up to the 8th digit? And they look at me and said, what are you talking about? The answer came directly from the calculator or the computer. How can it be wrong? And then I asked them, how can you measure pounds to 8 decimal? Do you know of any measuring scale that measure pounds to 8 decimals? So a lot of times they will present data where they don't have uncertainty bands. Okay? And I remind them of what Einstein once said, that we trust in God, everyone else must come with data with uncertainty bands around them. Okay. And so data is meaningless without uncertainty, but the important thing is that you have to make decisions even when you have uncertain data. So how do we teach our students that? Okay. You can't make wrong decisions, but the problem is you don't have certain data or a deterministic number. And those of you who have worked in plants or worked in factory projects know what I'm talking about. Leaderships also have to have resourceful and flexibility and be able to have trust and loyalty in a team setting. This is another very important aspect, and a lot of times people think that a teamwork means that you have a bunch of people in which somehow work gets done. Who gets the work done, you don't know, but somehow because you have a team, that's how it gets done. And it has, what I'm trying to say is that teamwork is great, but teamwork is impossible without individual commitment and individual work ethics. Because just think about it, if you have 5 people in a team and everyone is thinking that the other one is carrying the load, then no work gets done. The team is good only if everyone is doing more than what they should be doing. So that's why when one of you messes up, you're able to cover up that loss. It's very important to understand that the ability to relate to others and making sure that the decisions you're making is going to be okay with others. The advice I give on that is that when you make decisions, try to put yourself in the other person's shoes and see how that decision would feel to you if you were in the other person's shoes and this other person was now making that decision. Building collaboration, I think it's needless to say that that is very important. Collaborations could be of many kinds between single companies and single universities. Okay. For example, I used the example of Chevron earlier. If you can build a collaboration with them where you're trying to focus on their needs, their work, it is useful. Okay. Where you can address problems for them. The advantage is that you're solving not only their problems, but you're using them as a test bed to train, to educate your engineer as to what problems there are to solve. But one that is better than a single university, single company collaboration is consortium of companies and a university. For example, in our center at College Station, we have a consortium of companies that support the research in the center. In some way, it is grouping of companies with common goals and objectives. In this case, what our consortium, what their common goals are, is to improve process safety in the industry. So what they do is they provide a certain fee per company to be members of that consortium, and that fee or the collection of that fee is then used to fund research. Hire academics as consultants. I think this is a very good idea where when academics are hired as consultants by industry, not only are the academics able to contribute in solving problems for the industry, but the academics then bring back the practical issues that industry is facing. Funding employees for post-graduation is also very important. And networks for the licensing of technology. Used to be a time where in the tenure business in the universities, even at Texas A&M, licensing of technology was not given a lot of credit in the tenure process. But now it's a separate line item where if you have licensed technology, then that's given special credit. You have to build an alumni network. I always try to encourage people to think about networking, but there is nothing better than networking with your own alumni. They have fondness for your organization, for your institution, for the things that you have taught them, and so developing a network with them where every one of the graduates knows or hears something about what the university is doing is very useful. Participation in professional committees where decisions are made about engineering technology or standards and things like that is also very useful. And then being named to national academies. For example, U.S. National Academy of Sciences, National Academy of Engineering, and so on. I think those are very useful activities to help bolster the university. So industry-university collaboration, what does that do? It improves the quality of education and also improves finance. So in a teaching university, you can, because of this collaboration, you can help improve the curriculum and you can get student internships for the students to get industry experience. In a research university, you can build absorptive capacity to adopt and diffuse already existing technologies. And you can focus on appropriate technologies to respond to local needs, where because of that collaboration, that can happen. And finally, the modern universities are looked on as entrepreneurial universities, where if you look at, including Texas A&M, which I'll explain in a minute, where universities are the incubation ground or the incubation services for the major businesses. And there are various examples of major companies that have been spawned out of universities. And that's a contribution not only to the national and local economy, but also helps improve job employment and other things. At Texas A&M, for example, we have the academic campus, and then we have our incubation activities, where there's a large area where we engage in public-private partnerships, PPP, where the university will provide space for incubation of companies. And in some cases, these are professors who are trying to get to the market something that they have developed in their lab. And in some cases, it's companies that have come in and set up shop there because they want to build a bridge with the university's research arm. And really, really, that is beneficial for both the university as well as naturally the industry. And there are special courses on this type of entrepreneurship education. Some of the things that you can address through these types of partnerships and consortiums are, for example, addressing issues like safe water for Bangladesh. You have issues like the urban crisis, the disappearing groundwater. For a time, there was the arsenic levels issues. Here now that problem has been solved. Depletion in health and water quality, and then water and sanitation issues. And while potable water and scarcity is a problem in Bangladesh currently, but WHO estimates that 97% of the people have access to water, and only 40% have proper sanitation. And this is a problem that can be solved, and can be solved locally. And I think engineers and chemical engineers particularly can get into solving a lot of these problems. There are examples like this all over the world. In fact, one of the things that the National Science Foundation has identified, that water is going to be even more of an important problem than energy. In fact, there has been predictions that countries may go to war because of water issues. And so we have to pay attention to that. Where else could this be solved but in universities? I talked about these stakeholders involved. Let me spend a little bit more time on these. The World Health Organization is an international organization working on water problems, including water problems in our country, in Bangladesh. Along with WHO, the government of Bangladesh is also working on improving rainwater. But national academies like Bangladesh Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, they work on, for example, they work on arsenic treatment technologies and other work. But the university has a major role to play here, as I said. The water treatment research can be taken up as a multidisciplinary research. You have different faculties like chemical engineering, environmental engineering, some civil engineering can be involved. There could be other disciplines as well. The chemical engineers can work on different technologies, for example, removing arsenic. Parallel, the civil engineers can look at different technologies for rainwater harvesting, and environmental engineers can work on water quality. All stakeholders that could then be working on a focused effort. And so this division of work can be brought together only as I said earlier, by breaking down barriers and reducing the silos that come with creation of different departments. Transferring the knowledge. Once the challenge is addressed through engineering, it is important to document and transfer the knowledge to the next project. And transfer should be made in such a way that it cuts across different stages of time and is not time dependent. So there are various kinds of transfer as listed in this slide here. The serial transfer occurs when knowledge gained from one project or team activity is transferred to the next project or activity. Strategic transfer, on the other hand, takes place when there is collective knowledge of the university is tapped to accomplish a strategic task that occurs infrequently but is critical to the university. For example, development of a curriculum that is specific to Bangladesh's need will require a strategic transfer. Expert transfer, finally, is a team facing technical questions beyond the scope of its knowledge and seeks the expertise of others in the universities or organizations. So, I want to wind up my presentation by spending a few minutes on my favorite subject. Guess what it is? What it is? Process safety. So I want to address the issue of sustainable development and process safety. You know, there is no question, and you will agree with me, that the industrial growth and the explosion of products, services, and all that industry has brought along is why we have the standard of living we have today. But then, parallelly with it, look at all that has occurred. Okay, I've only shown here a timeline between 1974 and 2015. And they are pockmarked with tragedies like Flixborough, Saveso, Bhopal, Diaper Alpha, and on and on. And it seems like, I like to say this term, it seems like we are watching the same movie over and over again. And the reason I use that term is because it's not exactly the same incident, but it's not even also the same chemical or the same hydrocarbon. These are different things, but the learnings from them are exactly the same. Usually, lack of knowledge of the hazardous material is the first thing. The next thing is land use planning. The next thing is lack of risk assessments and locating facilities and so forth. And then sharing information to the public. And I could basically, without going to an accident site or looking at the details of the accident, give you the first 5 learnings from each one of them. In fact, one of the mentors said, I had Trevor Kless, he used to say, don't bother to do an investigation. I have a report in my files, I'll send it to you. And that is kind of true. And the reason is, why is it true? I think the reason it's true is because of our inability to learn. And when I say inability to learn, there are lots of people to play into. Naturally, in the industry, if they don't do an investigation, if they don't provide the results, you can't learn it. But once the results are out and the learnings come from these incidents, it's up to the universities to integrate that into the curriculum, into learnings, and into the different courses, the different disciplines we have, so that it becomes a learning that gets into our blood. And that's why when things are not integrated into the curriculum, we never learn. So my appeal to you, my suggestion to you, and I'm an academic too, we will not ourselves be able to win the game or the war, whichever way you play it, but we can do a lot. We can do a lot. If we are able to analyze and learn from these incidents and integrate that into our curriculum, in how we design and build future plans and how we operate them, then that will be that far ahead. There are various areas where we can make these contributions. I've listed those here: natural drilling and exploration, mining, refining, production operations and maintenance, transportation, storage of substances and materials. I list those because those are the ones that we usually deal with in the Process Safety Center. But there are tons more. For example, with the advent of all these nanomaterials, I'm really worried, we should all be worried, that a lot of environmental health and safety considerations have not been looked into while we're developing these nanomaterials. So we better look at them before it becomes too late and we have major problems. Similarly, there are other areas in the bio area that also requires a lot of forethought. So identification of key focus areas in process safety. These are not something that I am talking about. What we did is we convened a workshop of 50 process safety experts from all over the world. In fact, we had the opportunity to invite Professor Razia too to that workshop in College Station some 4 or 5 years ago now. At that time, these people got together and produced a document which was entitled Process Safety Challenges for the 21st Century. And even today, sometimes organizations like NSF will refer to this document to determine what areas need research and what areas need some activity in terms of education or academic curriculum changes. So, comprehensive curriculum development, I have a 5-point proposal here. First is to connect with national academies. There are many national academies like the Bangladesh Academy of Sciences, Bangladesh Council of Scientific and Industrial Research, and the Institution of Engineers by Bangladesh. Well, one could argue about the quality of these national academies. But I think what my suggestion here is that once you start interacting with them, they will also get into the habit of understanding what academia needs in terms of input and what their role rightfully is. Second is establishing a multidisciplinary innovation institute. It is important to pool in the existing expertise into an innovation forum where knowledge base can be created. And so this innovation institute could be operationally similar to corporate R&D laboratories where you link fundamental discoveries with long-term engineering research in designing products, services, and systems. And then tailoring postgraduate courses. Understand that undergraduate courses, there is a need for changing that too. But when you talk about postgraduate courses, they have to be more tailored to what the specific needs of that postgraduate area are. Incorporating technology-based learning in the undergraduate level, there is a lot of opportunities for that. And finally, I think universities have to and must do a lot with regard to short courses, workshops, and distance education. Not everything can be done through short courses, workshops, and distance education, but a lot can be. There's still room for classroom lecture, and that will not go away. But because of the cyber era, we have the opportunity to do a lot more through these other venues. So I leave you with this little figure that I drew up, where the objective or ultimate goal is sustainable engineering, because if we don't have sustainable development, or what we might call engineering for sustainable development, we'll not have anything. But in that regard, the three components that go in there are traditional engineering, specialized engineering, through a university infrastructure, where they come together and then deliver the needs for a sustainable development and sustainable society. So with that, I thank you for your attention. You've been very kind to me, both in my visits and in listening to what I have to say. I'll be happy to take any questions that you might have.
The last slide, university infrastructure, I didn't quite understand that.
Oh, so university infrastructure, what I mean by that, so for example, when I was giving the example of BUET growing from 5 departments to now 16 departments under those 5 original faculties. And then I talked about being able to break down the barriers between these departments. So while we want to grow special needs or special department areas, and I'm pretty sure that ultimately will be 20 departments or more, okay? But the infrastructure needs to be so flexible that we can bring together various disciplines. Let me give you an example very quickly. Now, if Naser were here, he would probably disagree with me, but in our university, what happens is that because through the administrative hierarchy, there is so much pressure for each department to show key performance indicators. The way those key performance indicators are set up may sometimes take away the incentive for the interdisciplinary nature. For example, okay, if I go teach a course in material science or mechanical engineering, he's not very happy about it, because that does not give any credit to the chemical engineering department. Okay, but I hold joint appointments in 5 departments, and the reason I hold this joint appointments is because mechanical engineering felt that some of my contributions could help that department. So these kinds of virtual barriers in how the system is set up can be a problem. The other part of infrastructure is that, let's say you need an NMR for your research, nuclear magnetic resonance spectrometer, and it costs $3 million to buy an NMR, and your project is now a failure because you don't have access to that NMR. But if the university has a centralized structure where the NMR is purchased and maintained in that centralized structure, with you in chemical engineer and he in mechanical engineer and someone else in biology can use it, that creates a much more productive infrastructure than for every professor to go and chase their NMR. So infrastructure has a lot in it. Some is to break the structure, and some is to create structure and create decentralized systems which support a lot of different people.
Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you for choosing in your topic the term more realistically, because this is a step process. We are now in a process of improving our curriculum from our time to be realistic first and then more realistic in the near future. For example, I am a mechanical engineer, and now our course has included engineering ethics, safety and code in our first year introductory courses. You know, nowadays students are shifting their profession from the education and science background to other areas. And because of the saturation of innovation process, you know, Because, for example, we have touch-screen mobiles, and maybe in the near future we will find voice-activated mobile phones. But these are fancy items, because I cannot use the touch phone, because whenever I put it in my ear, the option goes to scroll down to any other, and it is very difficult for me to back to the primary options, you know. So the people of today, the young generation, they are very much with the things, you know. So the problem is, and also I can see the directors of ICT now are BUET, and every time they are giving notice that for improving the web services to you, we are going to change such and such. But I am always getting into the trouble because the scenario is changed, and I cannot find what to put the icon and so and so. So, for example, last time I was trying to download your abstract, and it printed 4 pages, and it's continued to print. So I stop it here and come back with only 4 pages. But it's repetition of pages because I tried to send mails, and all is included, and repeatedly they're giving the same things. But I cannot do because I have to learn, and where is the time for me to learn this? Okay, you know, there have been saying for renewable energy for last several years. Now what we are seeing due to policy and politics, that for the last 12 years, the oil price is lowest nowadays. So the situation is different. And also, for our safety reason, there are, you have to consider for the mindset first. If you already covered, for example, if we said that our life is single life, and what we have to do to improve our lifestyle in this world, that is one thing. And if we think that, okay, we have 2 lives, one is the single life in this dunya, and another is renewable life afterwards, then the things are changed. Otherwise, you know, everybody is talking so many things around, we are attending seminars, it's very good, but afterwards, we are not freely talking to each other about this thing. So the problem is, to end up with, what will happen? Who will hang a bell to the cat so that the Mickey Mouse is alerted every time the cat is coming? Because, you know, when you are going to present somewhere in the so-called national academics, you know, for IB and other things, you know, their policy and other things are so tough, and there are hidden things, you know. Then afterwards, they will say, okay, professor, you have a very nice presentation, have a lunch with us and so and so, but it cannot be implemented, you know, because you know, everybody knows here. So if you come frequently, we expect that you come frequently to our country, and we will not lose our hope in future. But because you are from in this university, so you will know definitely that every time you come and you will improve to go to realistic things. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your question and comments. So I want to address each one of these very quickly. I agree that you need to be more realistic. There's, it's always a relative world, okay? And you can't get to 100% overnight. You have to make progress gradually. Also, the second thing that you talked about is how to adjust to changes. The only advice I have there is that change is a constant thing. Whether you like it or not, changes are going to happen. And best you can do is to adjust with it. I know IT and all of that, they create all kinds of problems, but the fact of life is that they are there, and so changes are going to occur, and you have to adjust to it. And finally, the issue of, you know, what do you do about these national academies and so forth. So I'd already suggested the formation of an innovation institute. The types of arguments you are bringing up, I think that would be great to have discussions with your colleagues in an innovation institute that you can start in the university. I think through that kind of discussion you arrive at consensus, and consensus arrived at locally here with local people is much better than consensus delivered by someone coming from outside, even if they're sons and daughters of your own soil. Thank you.
আসলে আমরা তো we are running out of time কারণ নামাজের ব্যাপারও আছে তো আমি এখন আমাদের সরি স্যার
One thing I'd like to know about the mode of teaching. Can you show, tell something about the mode of teaching in near future? And
So-
considering the the internet and the specific writing facilities.
Okay, so, I have to, I'm not trying to avoid the question, but I have to say that I'm not an expert on the teaching or retention of knowledge issue. Teaching has a lot to do with retention of knowledge issue. But the fact is, more and more, particularly the newer generation, is being used to learning from electronic modes and internet and so forth. But by the, at the same time that I say that, I will also say this, that face-to-face teaching and learning will never go away. There is a certain role of the teacher/mentor who is in a human form that you can interact with, okay? And regardless of how much they talk about humanized robots and humanized automation, that is never going to go away. So get used to more and more automation and internet and distance learning, but at the same time, the role of the Aristotles and the Confucius and the people who really teach by interacting with you is never going to go away.
থ্যাংক ইউ ভেরি মাচ প্রফেসর স্যাম মান্নান যেটা আমাদের পরে তো চায়ের ব্যবস্থা আছে ইনশাল্লাহ সেখানে হয়তো কিছু আলাপ পার্সোনালি করা যাবে তো এই মুহূর্তে আমি আমাদের অনারেবল ভাইস চ্যান্সেলর খালেদা ইকরাম প্রফেসর খালেদা ইকরামকে আহ্বান জানাবো সাথে হেড অফ দ্য ডিপার্টমেন্টকে যে আমাদের প্রফেসর স্যাম মান্নানকে একটু সম্মাননা দেওয়ার ব্যাপার আছে কিছু যদি কিছু বলেন আমাদের জন্য ম্যাডামকে ডাকছি সারা ডক্টর মান্নান Dr. Mannan, please, stage action.
এখানে আসি
ওই দিকে যাও
এদিকে আসলে ভালো হয় all my dear colleagues. I'm glad that I could come here to listen to the lecture. And the things that has been mentioned here, I think for engineering, education, academia as well as those who are in profession, some things are very important. We often don't like to communicate with people, general people. That is, I think some kind of drawbacks on our side. Once I read in an article that Armstrong, an activist, UN activist, he said that if you really want to have a sustainable world art, in that case, engineers will have to play their due role. And then there also he mentioned about the dissemination of information. What engineering or technical decisions engineers are taking, the general people must also understand it. So in his lecture I saw that the learning as well as its dissemination and giving away of information in simple languages to general people is very important for the advancement of the profession as well as for the people who are involved in academic pursuit. And when people will know about the kind of researches or the kind of steps or innovation that technical people are taking, they'll have more faith on technical people and will have to gain their confidence as well. I'm really happy that I could come. Thank you, Dr. Mannan, for giving us such a good lecture and explaining a couple of things that we needed to know, and we needed to be more aware of it. Thank you very much.